so make yourselves comfortable. What I was going to say this morning is, as we're waiting for everybody to join and to start, if anybody does have any questions about the online materials that they've been reading, anything that's come up in these sessions, or anything from your own personal experience, do feel free to use the beginning of these sessions to ask anything. I'm really happy to help if at all possible. So we'll just wait for everybody to join before we get started. But as I said, if anybody wants to ask me a question, you're very welcome. So Simon, you're saying, oh, what a wonderful question. So Simon's asking, he has a visual arts background, I so don't, and I was wondering about incorporating art into TEFL sessions. Absolutely. Art's a really good way, it's a fabulous context to bring into TEFL. You won't be surprised to know that it works particularly well with young learners, because obviously they're developing their motor skills, so anything that's art-based is fantastic. But also, as you get older, you can use art in lots and lots of different ways to, reinforce learning. So project-based learning is a really good space for art. So you can even just sort of, it doesn't have to be a sort of a full-scale art project, but even things like designing posters, illustrating their work, anything like that is fantastic. And if you can show them how to do it, then by all means go ahead. What you'll find about TEFL teaching particularly is that we all have our own sort of specialities. We all have our niche, and if yours is art, then fantastic. In fact, you can come and join me in my sessions, because I can't draw to save my life. Most of my students, when they look at what I've drawn on the board, are slightly confused. It sort of confuses them rather than helps them. But absolutely, please do, please do. Same with music. If anybody's a musician, then bringing music. I had a teacher in Singapore who was an amazing guitar player, and he used to bring his guitar in and do songs with the students. So absolutely, use whatever skills you have and bring them into the classroom. Good. There's Olivia this morning. Good morning, Olivia. How are you? Nice to see you. I'm just waiting for everybody to join. So I was just saying, if anybody does have any questions about any of the materials that they've been reading, any of the sessions, the online sessions, or anything from their own personal experience, do feel free to ask, and I shall do my best to answer. So I can just see a few people connecting, so let's just give them a couple of moments, and then we'll get started. Simona's asking, for absolute beginners, are there any resources online on how to structure lessons? Yes, there are. I'll be having a look next week at where you can get your resources from, Simona, but there are lots of textbooks out there for beginners. And what I would say actually is it's quite rare these days to teach beginners English. I'm going to be honest, I can't actually remember the last time I taught complete beginners. It's quite interesting because it's become such a global language. You rarely get sort of absolute starting from zero. You get low levels. But actual sort of complete beginners. However, if you want to transfer your knowledge into teaching Italian, then yes. So next week I'll deal with some of the places that you can get your materials from, and we'll have a look at things like textbooks, including for complete beginners. Great question. Lovely. So I think we're pretty much sort of ready to go. So for those of you who've just joined, a very good morning. I do hope everybody's well. And we're going to do a session today on pronunciation. Now, in the spirit of full disclosure, I should say that I was not a lover of pronunciation. Okay. About, I can't remember how many years ago, but after I'd been teaching for a number of years, I decided to go on and do a postgrad. And I did my University of Cambridge Delta, which is a level 7 qualification. And throughout the entire thing, I managed to avoid phonology quite nicely. In fact, if you go back and read the assignments that I handed in to my tutors, you will see a theme of you need to include more phonology in your plans. I then went back to my workplace and I went to see my director of operations to get my schedule back. And the first thing I saw on my schedule was 4 hours of focus on pronunciation on a Sunday morning. And my heart just sank. And I said to my director of operations, I said, focus on pronunciation for 4 hours. And he said, oh, you've just done your diploma. You'll be very good at this. So I had to sort of really go back and think about it. And that's when I fell in love with it. So what I want to do today is really simple. I want to just give you a basic sort of understanding of the key features. And we're just going to look at 3 areas. We're going to look at sounds, so the sort of the smallest unit, words and sentences, because those are the things that you need. I want you to have a think about the problems that students might have. And then we'll have a look at a couple of practical examples as well of how you can incorporate it into your teaching practice. Okay, so hopefully by the end of the session you will be a lot less scared of pronunciation than I was. So let's have a little look. I've got some questions for you, so do feel free to type into the questions section, which is in your control panel. So my first question: how many phonemes or sounds are there in English? Does anybody know? You've all gone quiet on me this morning. Does that mean nobody knows? 120, says Georgina. Too many, says Olivia. Good. Georgina, you will be pleased to know there are nowhere near as many as 120. That's the good news. 250, says Monty. Good gracious. 40 something, says Safia. Good, you're closer, Safia. There are 40 something. You're right, my darling. There are 44. There we are. That's the good news. And they're divided into sort of 3 sections, really. We've got 12 vowel sections, 8 diphthongs. Diphthong is just a fancy name for 2 vowel sounds put together. And then 24 consonant sounds. Now, for the observant amongst you, you will have worked out that there are more sounds than there are letters in the alphabet, and therein lies the problem of learning English. And quite often, the 44 Simons, well, they're good. Therein sort of lies the problem, because often the letter and the sound don't necessarily coincide. So let's have a little. Has anybody read their section on phonology yet? If you have, I'm about to find out. If you haven't, don't worry, that's what this session is about. Does anybody know what the difference between I and E is? So the first symbol there is an I sound, and that's an E sound. Long and short, Georgina, yes, exactly. So the I is a short vowel sound and the E is a long vowel sound. Now the clue is in that little colon just there. If you can see the colon next to it, as soon as you see that colon, you know it's a long vowel sound. Okay, so exactly, they're short and long vowels. Fantastic. So anybody, any idea between the difference of and ba. So they're what we call plosives. Okay, so a plosive is just that we send out air. Soft and hard, says Safia. Yes. Yes. What I want you to do is to take your hand. I feel a bit strange doing this into a void. And put your hand there on your throat. Okay, and together with me, I'm going to assume that you're doing this. Okay, just make the sound. Okay, then try the ba, 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 ba. Can anybody see any difference? So it's not so much where the tongue is. Have a think about, put your hand there. What do you notice? The throat moves. Exactly, Monty. That's brilliant. Yes. Okay. So yes, you're right, Safia. The p sounds more like a whisper, doesn't it? That's a nice way of phrasing it. So what we call that is very simply when it's a p. When you can't feel a vibration, so as Monty says, when the throat doesn't move, okay, it's unvoiced or voiceless, some people call it. And then the other, the ba, 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 where you can feel the vibration, is a voiced sound, okay? Now then, this is where most people go, oh my goodness, what is this? Okay, everybody calm down, do not panic. I am not expecting you to learn this off by heart. And I'll let you into a confession. I have many friends that are able to do this, are able to transcribe in phonemic script. I still can't. I've been teaching for 20-something years. I adore phonology, but I still have to have my cheat sheet in front of me. So please, please, please do not think that you need to learn this off by heart. However, I would say that you need to have a copy of it somewhere. Now, let me just explain this to you and try and demystify it so that we don't all have a panic attack. So you will remember that we had 44 sounds. For those of you who are quick counters, you will have worked out that every single one of those boxes, if you add them all up, makes 44 sounds. Okay, and at the bottom we have our consonant sounds. So the p and the b that we were just looking at, the t and the d, the ch and the j, the k and the g, etc. Okay, so those are our 24 consonant sounds. Okay. Now then, you will also see that they've been divided into two colours. So we've got the green, which is our voiced. So the voiced is where we've got the vibration in the throat. Okay, so if you try this one, for example, we've got the b, 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 you remember, the v, v, v. Again, if you put your hand there, you'll feel the vibration. Okay, and the blue, the outlined in blue, just means that there's no vibration. So p, p, p. Okay, no vibration. So that's the difference between the colours. Then if we move up to the top left-hand side up here, these are our vowel sounds. So you'll remember our long and our short, so our E and our I. We've got the E and the U. And again, if anybody's been reading about phonology, we have 44 sounds, but we've only given one of them its own name. And that's this funny upside down E here, and that's called a schwa. Okay, I don't know why we gave that one a name and none of the others, but we did. So that one's called a schwa. So all of those are our single vowel sounds. If we move over here, you'll see our diphthongs. And you'll remember that I said a diphthong is two vowel sounds put together, and you can see them. Okay, so you've got ua here, so tourist. Okay, what I like about a chart like this is they've got an example word underneath, so you can remember what the sound is. Okay, I find that really useful. You will find a lot of language classrooms around the world have one of these charts in the room. Brilliant. Okay, And as I said, I do not expect you to learn it off by heart, okay, but we need to be familiar with it. Now, I want to draw your attention to a couple of things on the chart, just because they're quite, in my opinion, quite interesting. Okay, so you'll see these funny little symbols here. Okay, this one and this one. And again, if we look at the blue and the green, if we put our hand back up there, no vibration, the vibration. Now then, does anybody know why those two sounds there cause so many problems for non-fluent speakers of English? In fact, sometimes it causes problems for proficient speakers of English. Try saying the word. So you've got Thursday and mother. And think about what you do with your mouth and look at your tongue particularly. What happens to your tongue when you say those two sounds? So, So Safia, yeah, one of them vibrates. So that is a vibration. Yeah, that's a voiced consonant sound. Think about where your tongue goes. You have to stick your tongue out between your teeth. And it is a very unnatural feeling for a lot of people who don't speak English proficiently. So to be able to go Thursday, mother, okay, so it goes out and comes back in again, and it's a very, very strange sound. Now, if you think about people you know who have problems with the TH sound, if we go over to Ireland, for example, they'll often, they'll talk about trees. So 3 trees becomes trees. Okay, and that's because they're not putting their tongue out. Okay, so as I said, even people who speak English as their first language struggle with this particular sound, and it's a really hard one to deal with. So those two do cause some issues. Okay, we've also got the ch sound and the j sound. Okay, sometimes they cause some issues as well. Which are the other ones? And sometimes people get sort of confused between the and the n. Okay, so there's a little bit of differentiation between those two, but again, they can be quite tricky. So, So I want to just have a little go and let's see if we can, so you're very welcome to sort of go backwards and forwards. If you've got a copy of the phonemic script somewhere around, if you haven't, quickly Google it. And we can do the first one together. So if we look at this, you'll always see that the phonemic script of a word is the forward slash at the beginning of the end basically denotes that that is a word. Okay, that's all it means. So it just means that the first forward slash is the start of the word, and the end and the last forward slash is that it is. So everything between those two slashes just indicates that that belongs to the same word. So if we look at the first one, we've got a p and an e and a t. Okay, so Pete. Okay. So if we go back to our phonemic script, you'll see we've got the p, the e, and the t sound, so Pete. If you have a look at the next one, we've got the st, and we've got, if we have a look up here, we've got the or sound, and then the k sound. Okay. Now then, that's all very nice and well, but unfortunately in English, this is what happens. So we've got Pete and we've got Pete. The second one, we've got stalk and stalk. We've got boy or boy. And we've got so, so, or so. Now then, what do we call false friends, Olivia, are words that sound similar in one language and you assume they have the same meaning in another language. So for example, particularly funny one is embarazada in Spanish, which means to be pregnant, and a lot of British people think it means embarrassing, so they'll very happily go around and say to people, oh, they want to say I'm so embarrassed, and they say yes, I'm pregnant. Causes a lot of yeah, those are all homophones. Well done, those of you. So this is the problem in English. So we end up with the same phonemic spelling but different words. Okay, so the spelling and the phonemic script don't always match. So why do students have problems saying English sounds? For many reasons, and I think we've just demonstrated, haven't we? So the first reason is students have their own sound systems. Okay, now you'll see there that I've mentioned the IPA, so the International Phonemic Alphabet. So the phonemic chart that we have in English, so if we just go back, sorry, too far. If we go back to that, okay, this is one little section of a big international phonemic alphabet, and every single language has their phonemic alphabet. Generally what happens is that the closer you are to English, so if we look at, for example, French or Spanish or German or Italian, there are some sounds which are the same. Okay, so you will see sounds on there that exist in those languages. The further away we go from English, the fewer sounds there are in common. So if you go into Vietnamese or Mandarin, you will see far fewer overlaps with the English phonemic alphabet. Okay, so that's the first problem. Then we have a lot of sounds, so they don't exist in their own language. So they look for an approximation. They look for something similar in their own language. And so if you think about, for example, the or and the o sound, sport versus spot, court versus cot, you'll often find that people who are learning English will use a slightly different vowel sound because they're using something that's similar in their own language. You'll often find the p and the b sound as well. So pig versus big, port versus bought, and quite often what's useful here is to so p, b. So you shouldn't get, or you can use your, as we did earlier, you can use your hand on the throat. That's a really good way of helping students. Okay. Are there any others that you know of? So on your travels around the world, have you ever come across any other problem sounds that people have had? So obviously the and the are pretty problematic in English. Any others? The R in French, yes, absolutely. You'll also find the H for French people. They will book a room in an hôtel, so you have to show them the hotel, and you have to show them how to. Yeah, so the sigh sound is so sigh is actually is two vowel sounds, but yeah, sometimes when you put vowel sounds together. So if you are working in Spain, you will see that they often put an F sound on the beginning of words that have an S and a consonant. So I went to Scotland. I'm from Spain. You will find if you go over into Asia, you'll find that Japanese people have problems with the R and the L. You will find V and W confusion in places like India and Germany. So they might go to the village because they get those two sounds muddled up. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So, Danny, the ch sound in Spanish doesn't exist in English. So that's a lovely example of a sound that exists in somebody else's phonemic alphabet that we have problems with. So, hijo, so you've got a silent H and a ch sound, you know, is completely different, isn't it? Yeah, the V and the B in Spanish, Olivia, that's right. They sound very similar, so they have problems when they come into English. Italians tend to pronounce swim as vim. Yeah, that's right. So the s and the z sound get quite confusing. Okay, so lots of sort of examples there from different languages. So one of the reasons that we introduced the phonemic chart into our classes, a number of reasons. So it gives, I would do this with adults. So as soon as, well, I'm saying adults, late sort of young adults upwards. I wouldn't do this with children. It's a little bit too confusing for them, but certainly from about sort of 15, 16, you can start introducing this. And a lot of them are actually quite familiar with it. So it gives them a visual reference and it provides extra guidance. As we've discovered, the spelling by itself doesn't really help us with our pronunciation always. You can turn it into games, so you can do rhymes and chants and tongue twisters, jazz chants, all of those sorts of things. So she sells seashells on the seashore is a really good way for, as Simona was saying, for Italians to help with the S sound. The good thing about it is that once they've understood the phonemic chart, and again, they don't need to learn it off by heart, they can pronounce any new word. And the way they can do that is if you take your mobile phone or you take your computer, and if you have a look at dictionary.cambridge.org and type in any word, you'll find that underneath you've got the phonemic script and you can click on the word and listen to it. So you can see the phonemic script and you can listen to it, and it solves any argument. It's great. So if you've got an argument going on in class about how to pronounce something, you can get them used to having an English dictionary. So the Cambridge one is excellent. And they can check it for themselves. It introduces the use of the schwa, and we use it a lot in English. It's a good introduction to word and sentence stress, which we'll have a look at in a moment, and sort of stress, rhythm and intonation. And what's most important is it contributes towards independent learning. So what we can do is we can sort of give them a diagram of the mouth. I do apologise, this is a photocopy, so it's come out, it's not as clear, but you can see that we use our nose, our lips, our teeth, the roof, oops, I'm so sorry, the roof of our mouth and our tongue. All of those things are really important in pronunciation, okay? And it's quite useful to give students that because you can demonstrate and describe it. You know, ask them, for example, where the tongue is for consonants. So t, t, t. Where's your tongue? It's at the top of your mouth, isn't it? T, t, t. But when it's the tongue is outside. So looking at how your tongue moves for different consonants, you know, how the lips are formed for vowels. So oo, or, e. So you move your mouth around, and that's really helpful. I always think that students should have sore facial muscles after they've done some work on pronunciation. You can get them to cut the diagram out, laminate it, and they can sort of use it as a sort of a guide. Think about breathing in air. So how are you breathing when you make a sound? And again, you can use a mirror. So the mirror for, can I see my tongue? If I can, I'm doing it well. Fingers on the throat for vibrations. All of those things. Now, as proficient English speakers, this is where you make a difference. This is where you score over a local teacher who's probably got fabulous grammar knowledge, but will be struggling to help them with the with the pronunciation. So a couple of sort of ideas for activities. This is one of the ones I do, so the difference between long and short. So I get them to check them first, and then I often do it as a sort of a race. So it might be that they have to stand up. So if it's a long sound, you have to stand up. If it's a short sound, you have to sit down. Or I might get them to run from one side of the room to the other, or I have a rope in the middle and I get them to jump, depending on whether it's long or short. Or they have to write it on a mini board and hold it up. Anything that gets them actively involved is good. And you'll see there that there's just one small sound of difference. So been, bin, e, I. And it's what we call a minimal pair. There's only one tiny difference. You could also do the name game, quite like this one. So Jill's favourite colour is pink. Jean's favourite colour is green. What do you think their favourite drink is? What do you think Jill's favourite drink is? So gin, says Safia. I think you're right, yes. What about Jean? What do you think Jean drinks? E. Tea. Oh, that's lovely, Simona. Yes, she probably drinks tea, doesn't she? And again, you can do this as a competition. You put them into small groups, and they have to fill it out as quickly as possible, bring it up, and whoever gets all of the first one to get all of them right, you know, they're the winners. And often you'll find that there's more than one answer, which is fine. And it just brings some nice sort of variety into the lesson. And of course, you can change the names. Okay, so things like that make learning pronunciation really fun. It doesn't have to be boring and static. So the next thing I wanted to have a look at is moving up to word level. So the phonemes are the sort of the individual units of sound. Quick question for you: how many syllables in that word? And you'll see that I'm not pronouncing it for a very good reason. 4. Yes, there are 4 syllables. Excellent. Okay, that's wonderful. So that's one thing we can teach our students, is how many syllables. Okay, so how many syllables does a word have? That's quite useful to know. More importantly, where does the emphasis go? So where is the stress on the word? Which syllable takes the strong bit of the word, the emphasis? Okay, so Safia says tie, so advertisement, says Safia. Okay, any other? At, says Georgina, so advertisement. Okay, any other thoughts? Tie, says Simon. Tie, says Monty. Okay, now I should say that the answer to that question depends on how old you are and where you learnt your English. Now then, for many years I confidently travelled the world, and when people ask me about this word, I said, oh, well, there are 2 answers. One of them is American and one of them is British. Everybody in the UK says advertisement. And everybody in the United States says advertisement. Happy. I came back to the UK about 3 years ago, and I started doing TEFL courses for schools, and I discovered that there's been a shift in my absence. And in fact, now a lot of people use the American. So you've either got advertisement or advertisement, and I blame television. I blame Netflix. So you all turned me into a liar, basically, happily telling everybody that everybody in the United Kingdom used the first one. It's not true anymore. So advertisement. So you will see in a dictionary. So again, go back to dictionary.cambridge.org and type this word in. You'll see the phonemic spelling underneath. and you'll see a little apostrophe, and the apostrophe just tells you which syllable is stressed. So it tells you that the next syllable is where the stress goes. So the British version will say this, the American version will say that. And this is really useful because you need to teach your students where the emphasis goes. Because if you go to somewhere like Malaysia, you will have people asking you if you would like any chicken, or, oh, she's so pretty, or, oh, I'm going to put it in my calendar. Okay, and as soon as you change where the stress goes in a word, it causes miscommunication. So this is really important. So every time you teach vocabulary that has more than one syllable, please, please, please tell them where the stress goes. So you can either do it like that, you can either use the apostrophe, or you can just put a little circle over the stressed bit. So for the first one, I would put it over here, and for the second one, I would put it there. Okay, it always goes over a vowel, by the way. So we need to teach our students that. And then the third section that we need to worry about when we're teaching sort of phonology to our students is the sentences. So we've gone from phonemes to words to sentences. And here what we need to do is think about connected speech. So if you think about an orange, when we pronounce it, we don't really stop and go an orange. We would say an orange. We run the two sounds together. So we run the consonant and the vowel sound together. And you're now going to know more than most people, even at diploma level, know, called catenation. You don't need to remember that bit. You just need to remember that the sounds go together. When we have something like pride and prejudice, can you imagine how long it would take us to say sentences if we had to speak like that? We run it together, don't we? So pride and prejudice. So we've got pride and prejudice. So the and sort of disappears. Pride and becomes and we just call that elision. It just means that we've missed sounds out. It's just a fancy word for missing things out. And then my last one, which is my favourite, mainly because I'm a foodie. Again, if you try and separate those words out, pizza, express, you have to breathe in the middle to get yourself to the next word. So we don't normally do that. We'll say pizza express. We put another sort of sound in so we can go from one word to the next. And that's just called intrusion. You'll see it in things like law and order. It's very difficult to say law and order. So law and order, we put a r sound in there, and that's just intrusion. And students need that because they need to be able to understand when other people are talking, but also it helps them to speak naturally. Now, I do apologise. I did say to you a couple of weeks ago that I was trying to use images from my own teaching for these slides, but unfortunately, and this may come as a surprise, I don't have a personal photo of Ryan Reynolds. So I've borrowed this from the internet. I do apologise. Now, this is a great activity to do in a class. Do make sure that they're not young learners. And you can change it, obviously, depending on the age and culture of your students. If you don't like Ryan Reynolds, please feel free to substitute him for somebody else. And the key here is to think about where we put the emphasis, the stress in the sentence. So what I normally do is I put a sentence like that on the board, and I get them to have a go in pairs and put the stress on different words in the sentence. And what happens is this: I didn't kiss Ryan Reynolds last night. Who did? I didn't. I'm accusing somebody else. I didn't kiss Ryan Reynolds last night. I could be talking to my husband and denying all knowledge of it. I didn't kiss Ryan Reynolds last night. I shook his hand. I didn't kiss Ryan Reynolds last night. I kissed somebody else, Reynolds. I didn't kiss Ryan Reynolds last night. I kissed him at some other point, okay? So we need to show our students that we put the stress on the important word in the sentence. And this is great fun because there aren't actually any rules for this. You can put the stress where you like in a sentence. But if you're helping students with presentations, helping them with their listening, this is a really, really important exercise to do, because in English, as I said, we place the emphasis on the key words in a sentence. So all a student has to do is to listen out for the stressed words in a sentence. They can pull those out and they can pretty much get the meaning of what we've been talking about. So this is a really useful little exercise to do. If you listen to TED speakers, for example, you'll see they do this really, really well. So that is a very brief guide to phonology. It's just a little introduction. And as I said, all you really need to be aware of are the phonemes, the words, and the sentences. And if all you do is when you teach your vocabulary, you put the stress on the word for them so they know which syllable is stressed, I will be happy. But have a look in the dictionary.cambridge.org, have a look at a few words, just have a look at the phonemic script underneath, okay? The reason I recommend that one is because it's the University of Cambridge, so it has high reliability, high validity. Some of the online ones can be a bit, I've seen phonemic symbols that don't actually exist. So I always use that because that's highly reliable. Now then, next week, Simona, particularly for you, we're going to have a look at lesson planning. So actually putting a lesson plan together, what needs to go in it, what we need to think about. And we're also going to be having a look at where we get our resources from. So where can we find this material for teaching? You know, do I have to think of everything myself? That's the good news. But we'll have a look at where we can find it. So that's next week, so next Monday and next Wednesday, and the floor is open for questions. Does anybody have anything they would like to ask, comment on? You're most welcome, Olivia. Hopefully you found something useful in there. Monty, some sort of assessment. I'm going to let the lovely ladies in the office answer that question. So Beth and Laura, if you're listening, Monty's asking about assessment. Simon, have I used poetry? Oh my goodness, yes. I adore using poetry. I've written a whole series of lessons on poetry. And it's great because you can use haikus. So teaching syllables using haikus is fabulous. I do acrostics, so I often use an acrostic as a warmer, in fact. I do, what else have I done? Shape poems. Yes, absolutely brilliant. Yes, Georgina, the sessions are all being recorded, my darling, so you'll be able to catch up, no problem at all. Simona, perfect pronunciation. I'm just going to answer Monty's question because Beth has just, there's an assessment at the end of their online course, so you'll get, there's an assessment with some questions, multiple choice questions and some written questions, Monty, so yes, there is. It's not a problem, Simona. I've come across lots and lots of teachers who don't have English as their first language. They are fabulous. I think just be aware of the phonemic chart and just try and use it with your students. And because you might have had some similar problems that they're going through, you're going to be much more empathetic. So no, don't worry about it. Just think about how, and there is no such thing as perfect British pronunciation anyway. Think about how many British people you know who have quite strange pronunciation. So no, don't worry about it. Wonderful, some great questions there, everybody. Lovely. Well, if that's all, I'm going to let you go and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. I look forward to seeing those of you who can attend on Monday. Thank you so much for joining me today. It was lovely to have you, and thank you for all your great questions. Have a super day. Bye for now.